Hey, I'm Gia Goodrich and welcome back to my channel. Today is a Photoshop tutorial on color correction perfection. We're gonna dig into Photoshop and I'm gonna show you how to make absolutely sure your photos are corrected properly. Now, everybody wants to get into color grading, but you can't color grade if you don't understand what neutral is. You have to correct before you color grade. And so that's what this tutorial is about today. And today you may notice I have no makeup. Why? Because I didn't really feel like it today, and I thought to myself, men don't have to put on makeup when they have a non-makeup specific YouTube channel. Why is that? Because people are coming to their channels for them and their information, not for their perfect eyebrows. So enjoy the under eye circles. Okay, stepping off my soapbox, back to the video. Pillar 1, workspace. This is where you are going to set yourself up for success inside of Photoshop to make sure your eyes are really able to do what you need them to do and understand color the way you need to understand color. 2 is a method leveraging the math in Photoshop to make sure your images are 100% corrected and the tones are reading true. 3 is a strategy so that you can go in and fine tune and push and move your colors so they really reflect you and your aesthetic. And 4 is the must-have tool every photographer should have in their kit with their computer at all times. So the first thing to understand is a little bit about the way the eyes work. We see color in terms of the context within which it exists, so relative to its surroundings. So if you look at this right here, is a great example. Those two bars in the middle are both the same shade and the same hue, but put in a background of either purple or green, our brain sees them and registers them as being very different colors. Now, why is that? We can go into the science about rods and cones and the way our eyes perceive color. I'm going to spare you all that because that's a subject for another day, another tutorial. But the important thing to know is that it's really important to have your settings in Photoshop dialed in so that you are eliminating most of that color skewing or luminosity skewing that happens. So I'm going to show you how to do this. The first thing to know is that when you are in Photoshop, your default will be in this viewing mode where you see these tabs up here that show you what you have open. I never like to work in this mode because if you use a space bar to move around, nothing happens. It sucks. So we always like to work in the mode where you press the F key and all of a sudden you can move around the image very beautifully. Now, the way that you cycle through modes is using the F key. So the first thing, if you'll notice, is this mode is set to white. This next one is set to 50% gray, and this third is set to black. Now, why is that? They're all neutral colors or non-colors or all colors, depending on how geeky you want to get with it. But it allows us the ability to see the luminosity information. So by cycling through white, gray, and black, we can say, okay, on a white background, how does it look? Gray background, okay. Black, okay. If your image really sings and feels good through all of those, then you're good to go. I've actually made this mistake a lot in the past where I liked working on a darker gray background, and so I retouched all of my images that way. Well, what happened is my images started to skew darker because my eyes were seeing the image relative to the background, so even though I thought it was really bright, it wasn't as bright as it should have been, and all my images kind of looked sad and dark. So first way is to fix this. The second is that you really start to be able to see how the images feel in terms of color, if they're skewing a little bit green, a little magenta, a little bit blue, a little bit yellow. So having that neutral background is a must. So I'm going to show you how to do this. Now, when you get into this default mode here, what you're going to do is click off to the side of the image, press Control and click, and you'll see these defaults: black, dark gray, medium gray, blah, blah, blah. You're going to do custom. Now, why is this? It's because white isn't available as one of those defaults. I don't know why. It's ridiculous. But you're going to go in here and let's say your color picker is somewhere random. You're going to drag it all the way to the corner and you're going to change. If you push it all the way, you'll see that these values go 255, 255, 255. When all three of RGB values are at 255, that means you've got the max white, and that's what we want. Click OK, and then you'll have this background change to white. We press the F key to get to my favorite movable view mode, and you'll click OK. Now again, you'll do custom because medium gray is not, I'll show you. See that shift? That's letting you know that that medium gray isn't actually medium gray. So you're going to do Control click, set custom color, and type in these values. Now, if we know 255 is white, half of that is going to be 50% gray. Now, it's actually 127.5. So when you're in Photoshop, either 127 or 128 will work because a lot of times you don't get the 0.5 values. So changing these two, and you can see I already did it, but let's just do it for the sake of this. Do 128, 128, and 128. Now, you'll get this fabulous 50% gray and you're good to go. Last one, click the F key one more time and click, and then this one you can just set to black. Now you should be just like me where you can cycle through pressing the F key, white, gray, black. Again, that allows you to make sure you have a clean slate for your viewing, so your perception isn't being skewed by whatever the background is. Now that that's taken care of, the second thing we want to do is figure out how to really set the color temperature and make sure we are operating in a neutral. So if I go to my favorite view mode and I look at this against a 50% gray, it feels maybe a little green's coming through, a little bit yellow maybe. I'm going to show you later in the video how to figure this out with your eyes, because even though we can set true values, and I'm going to show you how to do that in Photoshop, really our eyes are always going to be the best, because color is also about mood and feel and all of these things. So you always want to figure it out in Photoshop and then gut check it and maybe change it based on that. Ooh, and if you want to know my top tool for making sure your color correction is on point, stick around because we're going to talk about that at the very end. If we look, and I'm just going to cycle through this image so you can see, because I love to do that so you can see the before. This is straight out of camera. Ew, right? See, we'll do this so you can really see it. Straight out of camera, what the image recorded, not beautiful, not my fave. And the first thing I did before even getting it into Photoshop is use the Camera Raw editor and a brilliant plugin called Avisco. I have a whole video on how we do it. It takes like 20 seconds to get this done. So I do this to immediately get it into an awesome color space. Now, you will notice that this is really saturated, right? It's super vibrant, way more than we would want. My color grading that I do in Camera Raw brings that out, because I know my color grading process is gonna desaturate it. So I compensate knowing what my color grading process is. So here's the image going through all of the retouching. So if we look at this, all that, you can see that the work we did, well, I did. I used a royal we. Then we're going to take it to this color correction so we know, ooh, it's feeling a bit yellow. Okay, we know some color situation is going on. How do we take it? And this is what the color corrected version will be. So how do we get there using Photoshop and making sure it's all dialed in? So I'm going to walk you through this process that I first came upon by an amazing channel called TutVid. So if you aren't following them, you definitely should. And it's really great, fast process. And I actually have an action for it that I'll have in a link below for you. But I'm going to show you how to do it because I want you to understand. So you're going to create a new layer. And when you go to do that, press Option. And this will just give you this dialog box. We're just going to name it Gray and click OK. So the new layer is up top. Then you're going to go to Edit and Fill. Now, your default might be set to background color because a lot of times it is. You're going to set that to 50% gray. Now, you should see this. It should be the same color as your background. That's how you know it's working correctly. And then you're going to do this little trick. You're going to change the blend mode to difference. Now, what is that doing? Photoshop is now revealing to you the pixels that are far away from 50% gray and the ones that are close to 50% gray. Black means it's exactly the same as 50% gray. Any other tones or colors mean it's far away. So you could do this, but again, you're relying on your eye and we want to be scientific. So you're going to go in here and do you're going to do an adjustment layer. and do a threshold. Now, what threshold is doing is saying, I only want to see this very specific range. And you're going to take this all the way down to 2. It might be hard to see at first, but if I zoom in, suddenly there are some black pixels revealing themselves. What those black pixels are telling me are that those pixels are the closest to 50% gray. So you're going to zoom in on one. Let's zoom on this little pixel right here. And then you're going to press I to get the eyedropper. Then you're going to press the shift key to set a sample point. So this info panel will come up, and that's great. We're not going to use it right this second. We're going to use it later. So now you have that sampled. You don't need these layers. So we're just going to toss them in the trash. And you'll see now we have this little pixel is the closest in the entire image to 50% gray. Now, if we look, remember our value should be either 127 or 128 per this RGB channel. So red's 132, blue's 108, and green's 128. The green's on point, blue's off, red's off. So how do we fix that? So we're going to do another adjustment layer and do curves. Now, if you have your little panel visible right here, what you'll notice is that my info panel just disappeared and now we have curves. You want to bring it out so you can see both. So now clicking on the info panel, we can see both curves and info. So curves has this awesome little functionality called sample image to set gray point. So what we're going to do is click that and then say, hey, this pixel right here that we've already established. Now, just with that one move, you'll see that the image changed, right? But here's the thing. You want to double check this because sometimes Photoshop does wonky stuff, and this to me doesn't look color balanced. So we're going to go in and I want to show you how this operates. We're going to go to the red channel. And what we did, sampled right in the middle where that is. So we're going to click on that. And if you look right here, these values are telling me that red is set to 132. So what we're going to do is use the up and down arrows. And we're going to take it down to either 128 or 127. So right there, 128, perfect. Then we're going to go to the green channel. And right now it's at 131. Well, we want it, again, at 128 or 127. So we're going to take that down to 127. Perfect. Then with the blue is way off. So now what I also want to watch here is right where it says input output. Again, this is a map of the luminosity and color information in the image. So half of 255 is either 127 or 128. So we want to make sure the input and output is right there. That means that 50% gray. So if we're looking, that blue is at 108, which is way far from where we want it. So I'm going to move that up until we get to 127. Okay. So now if we look, I'm going to zoom out. That image feels a lot more balanced, right? Doing on and off, we can see, wow, it was really yellow before, and now we have everything neutral. The one thing I will tell you about the sample point, because after you do it, it's going to drive you crazy, is you go back to the eyedropper tool by pressing I, press Shift and Option, you'll see these little scissors, and you just snip it, and then it's gone. And that's how you make sure your image is dialed in. Now, are you ready for a fast way to do this? Here is another image of mine that I love with the fabulous Hazel. I'm going to show you how to do that using the action. So we have, I'm going to show you the raw and retouched. She's beautiful to start with, but as the camera doesn't record everything perfectly, we retouched it, smoothed it out, and her beauty is totally revealed because she's amazing and phenomenal. So if you click the link below, I will send you an action pack that will have this action built in so you can just plug and play. And I'm going to show you how that works. In the action panel, you might see it like this. Now, this is ugly and horrible, and nobody likes this. So you go up to this little menu and press button mode. And magically, your buttons are just clickable. which is super awesome. So I have a bazillion actions because I'm a Photoshop nerd, but this one right here at the bottom is one I made for you. So here we go, click. And you'll see it has created in a little folder for us, color correct view. We have that 50% gray layer set to difference. And we have the threshold, which is set to 2. So then all we have to do is zoom in to find our point. And we see, okay, we have our pixels already ready. So we press I to get the eyedropper. We'll zoom in. I like to zoom in pretty far just to make sure that what I'm sampling is legit. So press the shift key, clicking right on that pixel. Boom. Now you can throw this in Le Trash. And then we have that pixel all ready to go. Now, before you zoom out, we're going to get the curves going. So adjustment layer, curves. And then we'll do sample gray point. And then we're going to double check it because we want to make sure it's accurate. So we're going to go into the red channel and click on that point. And it should say 127, 127. We look and the red channel says it's 128. That's good. Then green, 128. That's great. Now, if we look, the blues are just slightly off. So, oh, and see, we are at 131 and 127. So we're going to move it to 127, 127. And then we're going to bring that to 127 because it won't go to 128. All right. So see, we had to make a little bit of corrections there. So now if we look, and I'm going to take this sample point away because it annoys me. So now if we look, this is before. I'm going to bring this on black. So before, after, before, after. So you can see before there was a little more magentas happening, and now we have a little bit more of that warmth coming through in her skin. The next aspect to this, which is really important, is to learn to trust your own perception and how to make color corrections based on that. Because we know now what's technically correct, but there's so much that goes into an image that really has to do with emotion and your voice as an artist. For me, I like skin tones to be a little on the warmer side and backgrounds to be a little on the cooler side. So I'm going to show you how to make those adjustments. So now we have neutral. What you're going to do is go into an adjustment layer and click selective color. Now, if you aren't familiar with selective color, I want you to learn it, live it, love it, because selective color is so powerful for color grading. Now, I do have another tutorial up on color grading that dives into it more in depth. So if you want a little bit more help, definitely check that out. For the sake of this tutorial, we're going to ignore all these colors because we don't want to dial it in specifically to a color. We want to do overall tones in the image. So we're going to stick to whites, neutrals, and blacks. Now, my strategy for doing this is always going crazy and then dialing it in. So you want to see what it does. So cyan, and then red is the opposite of cyan. So looking, okay, and I actually think some cyan in this is real nice. Okay, so we land there. Now magenta, the opposite of magenta is green. So we're gonna go really green, really magenta, obviously way too much, but I like a little bit of magenta in there is pretty nice. And then let's look, yellow on one end and blue on the other. So let's see. Now, I don't really like a lot of warmth in there right now, so, but not a lot of cool. Now, what you're going to do is really notice that the global movements that you'll make will be pretty small. That's because you've seen this has so much power in it that you can really make things like super crazy. Now, you're going to ignore the black because that's messing with luminosity. We would totally do that in a different step, right? Because we're not going to adjust how light or dark things are, luminosity. We are just going to address color. You want to always separate those two steps. So if we turn this on and off, already that's a change that we can see. So it's going from warm to a little bit more magenta. Now, what I might do even is cool it down just a little bit more. There we go. So warm, a little bit cooler. And I'm gonna maybe just adjust the cyan one too, because that's a little too much for me. So this is gonna have to do with your personal taste, obviously. For me, I know what I like and I can spot it pretty quickly. Now, the other thing to pay attention to is the whites and blacks. This is actually, in terms of color grading, where you see a lot of the fashion voice coming in. So if we look at the whites, now you'll see, I'm gonna zoom in so you can really see. Look at the highlights in her forehead, how they're changing. Way red, way cyan. And then really green, really magenta. Now, I kind of think it's attractive with a little bit of green in there. And again, I'm just fiddling around to see what I like. Then when we come to blacks, and I'm going to zoom out. Now, a lot of this image is black, or really in the dark tonal spectrum. So you'll see this really influencing a lot. This is where you really see that fashion look, is a lot of times in the darker tones, they'll be skewed a little bit. So this is where we start to get really magazine editorial. So pushing it really red, really cyan. Now, of course, if we do cyan, it brings out a lot of the tone work in her skin. But if we kind of counteract some of that tone work that we did before in the neutrals, it can create a really beautiful, interesting look. So if we look before, after, this has a lot more mood and feeling to it. Before, after. I'm going to show you on black so you can see, wow, we really did a lot of work in terms of magenta. And this is why you cycle through, like I said, is that on a 50% gray wasn't looking as magenta as it looks now on black. Then you say, wow, those blacks are really lifted. So this is why we have that as a safety measure, because what I might do is say, okay, overall I like this, but I'm going to back off a little bit and just dial it down. And so I'm just taking the fill down on that adjustment layer. And then it's in a zone that feels really good to me. Before, after. As promised, the fourth pillar is an absolute must-have for photographers, and it should travel with your computer at all times, and it is a color calibration system. Now, my personal recommendation is the Color Monkey display. It's not the most expensive out of everything, and there's a reason why. You can get super fancy, you can use color cards, you can use all these things, but really the functionality you need is for this little device to tell your monitor what the appropriate colors and values are. So having a little device like this, you can put it, it just goes easily on your computer like that. You run a program and then you're good to go. It takes about 15 minutes, even though it says it takes less time. But then you know your screen is 100% showing true colors, and that is totally invaluable, because everything I've showed you up to this point is great, but if your screen is off, it really can't help you at all. So check the description box. I have a direct link to this. I've had it for 2+ years, worked on super serious commercial gigs, and it's served me well every time. And it's super compact, so you can really have it with you. And I will do it on set if we're on location, because it also has the ability to factor in ambient lighting conditions. So now you have a full command over the 4 pillars that are going to help you with color correction. Be sure to comment below and let me know what you learned from this, what you're excited to use moving forward, and what you want a little bit more help with, because I'm happy to make videos to really help you on your journey. And be sure to subscribe, because every week I'm coming out with new content that's designed to help you as a photographer get exactly where you need to be. And click the link below where you can download my action pack that has this color correcting action and a lot more to help you save lots of time.